Good morning and welcome to the Joint General Session meeting of the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body. Please note that today's call is being recorded, and currently all attendees have entered in a listen-only mode. There will be opportunity for public comment throughout today's call, and we will give you instructions on how to make a public comment at that time. With that, I'd now like to formally begin today's call and turn it over to Roger Collinton. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Silas, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our joint meeting today, and let me go ahead and start us out officially with our roll call, and then I will turn it over to our chairs for some initial comments. And we'll do this alphabetically and start with you, Chair Bornstein.
Here.
Member Campbell.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
Vice Chair Edo.
Here.
Governor Galitova.
Present.
Chair Konzioka.
Here.
Governor Leslie.
Here.
Member Prescott.
Here.
Governor Shorey.
Here.
And Vice Chair Wagner.
Here.
Thank you, board members and governing body members. We do have a quorum and we may proceed. Our first item on the agenda is our chair welcome, and then we'll move to public comment if there's any general public comment. And let's start with you, Chair Bornstein.
Thanks, Roger, and welcome to everyone on the line. I want to start by acknowledging that we're holding this meeting today on Juneteenth, a federal holiday that celebrates the end of slavery and recognizes the burden that that horrible institution has imposed on enslaved people and their descendants. Normally, we would not hold a meeting on such a day or any federal holiday, but the urgency of moving forward on the primary matter before us today and the difficulty in finding room on people's schedules, both on the governing body, the Board of Governors, and the CAISO staff, necessitated this unusual decision. We don't anticipate scheduling activities on Juneteenth in the future, and I apologize to anyone whose schedule has been disrupted by this. We do have a very weighty and intense topic on the agenda today, one that many of you on the line have filed comments on and participated in. We very much appreciate the input that we've gotten from everyone, and I look forward to the discussion and moving forward on this difficult topic. And I will turn it over to Rob.
Severin, thank you. Good morning and welcome to everyone who's joining us this morning. I'd like to echo the remarks made by Chair Bornstein. It's maybe regrettable to have this meeting this morning, but as Severin stated, this was an important topic and has a matter of urgency to it. I would like to note that yesterday at the governing body meeting, we had the opportunity to hear from the governing body market expert, and we look forward to hearing from Department of Market Monitoring, Market Surveillance Committee, and staff, and outlining just where we are. As Chair Bornstein stated, this has had a very healthy discussion and significant amount of comments. And then lastly, let me just end with, even though we had many remarks yesterday and even at our last joint session, this will be John's last official meeting, and we appreciate his time today to join us and his thoughtfulness on this subject and whatever the outcome is. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Roger.
Thank you, Chair Bornstein. Thank you, Chair Konzioka. Our next item is for general public comment, and this is an opportunity for folks to comment for items that are not on the agenda. So let me just reiterate that we will have a comment period later during our agenda item for the EDAM congestion revenue allocation, and this is not that time. So if you have general public comment, Silas, could you open the queue for that?
If you would like to speak under general public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon at the bottom center of your Zoom screen. Or if you are dialed into the phone-only line, please press #2 to enter the comment queue. At this time, there are no hands up in the general public comment queue.
Thank you. Our next item, agenda item number 2, is our decision on our May 21st, 2025 joint general session minutes. And I'm just going to note before I surprise anybody that I am going to revert back on this because I think it's a pretty simple motion to the just asking all to vote and not to go through the roll call, which I have been doing throughout our Zoom meetings for the last 5 years ish. So the motion is move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body approve the joint general session minutes for the May 21, 2025 joint meeting. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Excellent. Thank you, board members and governing body members. Let's move to our next item, which is agenda item number 3 for our CEO remarks. Elliot?
Thanks, Roger. Well, good morning, Chair Bornstein, Chair Kanzioka, and members of the CAISO Board of Governors and the Western Energy Markets governing body. I also appreciate everyone being here today on a federal holiday for this special decision meeting. And we'd like to thank all of our stakeholders for working so closely with us over the past few months to get us to this point. With everything else going on, folks are extremely busy, but we really did have very strong participation in all the meetings, very robust feedback through comments, as I think you've seen, and overall just outstanding collaboration throughout the process. And so I really want to thank everyone who participated, and also just a nod of appreciation to CAISO staff for your professionalism and responsiveness. In advance of Miloš's presentation here shortly, I'd also like to especially acknowledge the efforts and input of the Department of Market Monitoring, the WEM governing body's market expert, and the Market Surveillance Committee for their extremely valuable input and critiques of the congestion revenue allocation proposal. And I'd like to just state, even in advance of this morning's discussion, that at the CAISO we do intend to conduct very careful additional disaggregated analysis and monitoring in advance of the EDAM go live in 2026, with the intention of being prepared to put in place any additional mitigation measures that may be necessary. And we're also really looking forward to working very closely with our market participants and the broader stakeholder community in the months ahead on longer term solutions to these important issues that do seek to best address the market efficiency and reliability goals of the extended day-ahead market. So just wanted to offer those initial thoughts. Thanks again for everybody for being here. One final appreciation to John Prescott. Thanks again for all your service, and looking forward to the discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. We can move now to agenda item number 4, which is the decision on extended day-ahead market congestion revenue allocation. And let me first note, before I turn this over to for the introduction and management's presentation, that we did receive public comment letters on this. We received 4, one from Appian Way Energy Partners LLC, one from Idaho Power, one from Western Energy Markets Regional Issues Forum, and one from Pacific Core. Those letters have been provided to the governing body and to the board, and I'm noting those for the record at today's meeting. And with that, let me introduce Anna McKenna, our Vice President of Market Design and Analysis, to set us off on the topic.
Thank you, Roger. Good morning, Chair Borenstein, Chair Kanzioka, Board of Governors, Western Energy Market governing body members, colleagues, members of the public. I am pleased to be introducing Miloš Bosanek, Sector Manager of our regional markets, who will be presenting to you our proposal for a transitional and targeted change to the congestion revenue allocation methodology in EDAM. I would like to echo Elliot's comments, and with that, and without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Miloš.
Thank you, Anna, and Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Wagner, respected Western Energy Markets governing body members, Chair Bornstein, Vice Chair Edo, respected boards of governors. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you a proposal on changes to the congestion revenue allocation design in the forthcoming extend the day-ahead market. We can go to the next slide, please. The proposed changes that we're bringing to you today aim to address concerns raised within the pending PacifiCorp tariff proceeding on their open access transmission tariff modifications implementing EDAM. In that proceeding, some of PacifiCorp's transmission customers raised concern that the current EDAM design for congestion revenue allocation may not allocate sufficient congestion revenues to the EDAM entity to cover the congestion cost exposure when their transmission customers exercise or use their firm transmission rights under the tariff. And in response to these concerns, the ISO initiated then an expedited but targeted stakeholder process to further discuss the current FERC-approved design and consider potential modifications to be responsive to the market participant concerns. Throughout the stakeholder process and multiple proposal iterations, we've identified a transitional design based on a narrow change to the congestion revenue allocation associated with parallel flows. This proposed change would reallocate additional congestion revenues to the EDAM entity, which would then suballocate these revenues to their transmission customers exercising their firm transmission rights, thus providing congestion cost protections consistent with the terms of their open access transmission tariff. Next slide, please. I will start by discussing the current EDAM congestion revenue allocation design to contrast it better with the narrow change that we're proposing. Under the current design, the market operator collects and then allocates all congestion revenues resulting from a particular transmission constraint to the EDAM balancing area where that transmission constraint is located. This methodology for congestion revenue allocation is consistent with the existing design for allocation that has been effective within the Western Energy Imbalance market today. The design was then carried forward into the EDAM and was approved by FERC. The rationale behind the current design is that the host balancing area bears the operational effects of managing the constraint and the resulting congestion that materializes within its balancing area. And thus it's appropriate to allocate all the resulting congestion revenues stemming from the constraint to that balancing area where the constraint is located. If we go to the next slide. Through the stakeholder process, we've identified and are proposing today for your consideration targeted and narrow changes on how congestion revenues are allocated in the upcoming EDAM. We see this as a transitional design, which will continue to evolve as early as the first year of EDAM operations, as we also work towards a long-term and durable structure to that design. The proposal affects how parallel flow congestion revenues are allocated. These parallel flow congestion revenues are generated as a result of a transmission constraint that is located in a neighboring balancing area. And under the proposed design, the parallel flow congestion revenues would be allocated to the EDAM balancing area where these congestion revenues are collected, not where the transmission constraint is located, but to where these revenues are collected associated with submitted and cleared balanced self-schedules exercising their eligible firm transmission rights that have been reserved under the open access transmission tariff. This design allocates the parallel flow congestion revenues to the EDAM balancing area where the transmission customers are exercising those transmission rights, thus providing the EDAM entity with sufficient congestion revenues to further suballocate under the terms of their tariff and provide the transmission customers a more complete congestion cost protection. The design also naturally limits the amount of parallel flow congestion revenues to the amount of transmission rights that exist and are actually being exercised within the day-ahead market. The transmission rights themselves are also limited to the transmission capability of the native transmission system and generally do not increase unless new transmission is being added. Any remaining parallel flow congestion revenues that may accrue after accounting for the allocation for the exercise of those eligible firm owed transmission rights Any of those remaining parallel flow congestion revenues would then be allocated to the balancing area where the transmission constraint is located. And this aspect is consistent with the existing design that's in place in EDAM. Management views this transitional proposal as a narrow and targeted change that responds to stakeholders' original concerns and reallocates parallel flow congestion revenues then to the EDAM entity, who under the terms of their tariff can further suballocate them and provide a congestion cost protection to those transmission customers. We go to the next slide. An important aspect to this proposal is the commitment to monitoring the effects of the proposed design in front of you today. We see this as a transitional design, as I mentioned, which will continue to evolve as early as the first year of EDAM operation as we work with stakeholders towards a long-term durable design. And as I will discuss, these enhancements discussions will commence later this year in the fourth quarter ahead of EDAM launch. Both the stakeholders, the Market Surveillance Committee, the governing body, market expert, and the ISO, we all agree to the need to establish robust monitoring and reporting transparency on the proposed transitional design that will be supporting the launch of EDAM. This would allow us to evaluate the impacts of the design, the impacts of congestion revenue allocation, and allow us to take steps to address issues and inform further evolution of the design, or further respond if needed to any unanticipated or unintended results. The proposal identifies several areas of data monitoring, which include the frequency of binding transmission constraints across the EDAM balancing area as that footprint grows, the effects of those transmission constraints on congestion prices within the EDAM balancing areas and the resulting congestion revenue allocation between the balancing areas, including parallel flow congestion revenue allocation. And it will also include the magnitude and frequency of self-scheduling that will be monitored across the EDAM footprint, particularly associated with the exercise of those specific firm OAT transmission rights which support the parallel flow congestion revenue allocation under the proposal. The Market Surveillance Committee and the governing body market expert have also suggested additional information for monitoring in their opinions that were published this week, such as more granular and disaggregated data and additional areas for monitoring that can help further inform design evolution. One of those areas is tracking the exercise of any new firm OAT transmission rights that may have been arranged or acquired since EDAM launch. The ISO is going to seek to provide this information, and we may need to coordinate with the EDAM entities to gather some of the data, but we're committed to providing that as well as part of the monitoring process. We will then report out frequently on the data monitoring through monthly EDAM reports, quarterly market forums, as well as through the reinitiated stakeholder working groups that will be in place. The Market Surveillance Committee also suggests conducting pre-market sensitivity analysis to further evaluate and approximate the parallel flow impacts in the day-ahead market, as well as further analysis of the real-time market data, among other suggestions. And the ISO will conduct this suggested analysis, which will form the basis of discussions as the stakeholder working groups are reconvened. We're committed to this monitoring and analysis even before EDAM goes live. For example, as we onboard additional entities, we will have additional clarity on the model constraints and on the quantity of transmission rights, their sources and the sinks being registered, that will give us the additional clarity and certainty about the extent of OAT transmission rights that may be used and their impact on parallel flow congestion. In addition, there's also an opportunity to gain information and analysis during EDAM market simulation, which will start later this year, as well as the parallel operations period with Pacificor as the first EDAM entity prior to launch, where the market is operational but not settled. This can provide us further insights into the impacts of constraints and the effects of the proposal. A key aspect of the proposal today is that it is transitional, as I mentioned. The design supports the launch of EDAM, but we will need to evolve as the EDAM footprint rapidly grows in order to more effectively manage parallel flow effects on congestion between those balancing areas, but also to manage the allocation of resulting congestion revenues, recognizing the unique structure of the EDAM. and the continued ability of the entities that participate to perform sales of oat transmission service, and managing as well as the incentives that may arise based on the structure of the design that's in place. As part of the stakeholder process, stakeholders in the ISO place great emphasis on ensuring that the transitional design does not become the long-term permanent design by default. Stakeholders urge the ability to continue to dialogue on the development of a long-term design, development of more permanent and more durable design, to congestion revenue allocation, and mechanisms for hedging congestion costs, especially as that footprint expands. With stakeholder input throughout the iterative proposals, we've established a roadmap for continued stakeholder engagement, recognizing that need to evolve the design. To that end, as I mentioned earlier, the ISO will launch the stakeholder working groups or re-engage those working groups prior to EDAM go live later this year in the fourth quarter to reconvene stakeholders and consider near-term design enhancements that can be implemented within the first year of EDAM operations or soon thereafter, and also focus discussions on a long-term and more durable design beyond any year one enhancements that may be identified through that process. As part of those near-term enhancements in the first year of EDAM operations, the ISO and stakeholders would consider enhancements that improve market efficiency by exploring various methods that would incent economic bidding and reduce the self-scheduling incentives, along with further symmetry in allocation of parallel flow congestion revenues and congestion revenue rights in the CAISO balancing area. As part of these same working group discussions, the ISO will engage with stakeholders in the development of a long-term congestion revenue allocation design, a durable design. This long-term design will be evaluated through the stakeholder process across a 12 to 24-month period, by the end of which the ISO will bring a long-term proposal to the governing entity for consideration. And as part of that stakeholder process, the ISO will provide quarterly updates to the ISO Board of Governors, the Western Energy Markets governing body, on the initiative progress, including any alternatives or proposals that may be under consideration, their associated implementation timelines, and updates on the monitoring of congestion effects in the EDAM footprint. An approved long-term design then would seek to be implemented within that third year of EDAM operations. Next slide, please. Overall, management believes that the proposed transitional congestion revenue design, with the targeted changes associated with allocation of parallel flow congestion revenues, is responsive to the concerns raised by market participants, which led to the launch of this initiative. The design enables allocation of additional congestion revenues to the EDAM entity to account for the parallel flow effects on congestion prices when transmission customers exercise their firm transmission rights. And this will enable then the EDAM entity to further sub-allocate these revenues under the terms of their open access transmission tariff and provide additional or more complete congestion cost protections for those customers. The design, as I mentioned, also establishes robust monitoring and reporting measures associated with the transitional design and the congestion effects in the EDAM footprint, along with a roadmap for continued stakeholder engagement and considered prompt evolution of the design. We go to the next slide. So in discussing the stakeholder process, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the robust stakeholder engagement on this expedited initiative. Stakeholders have dedicated their time and effort across this expedited initiative, prioritizing it among other efforts, and their input and comments have helped shape each iteration of the proposal that has shaped the proposal in front of you today. Over the last 2.5 months, we've published 4 paper iterations. We've held 3 long stakeholder workshops, and stakeholders have provided 69 sets of written comments across the paper iterations, helping shape the proposed design. Stakeholder comments generally support the proposal and recognize it as a reasonable or acceptable compromise on a transitional design to support the launch of EDAM in 2026, in May of 2026. Recognizing the commitment to evolve the design through potential near-term enhancements and, and evaluation of a more durable and long-term design. In contextualizing the broad stakeholder feedback, I do want to acknowledge some of the concerns expressed by stakeholders, as well as the Market Surveillance Committee, the governing body market expert, all of which form the basis for further monitoring and the commitment to further evolve the design. A number of stakeholders have expressed concern that the design will create broad self-scheduling incentives as parties seek to exercise their eligible firm out transmission rights through a self-schedule to derive a congestion hedge. Both the Market Surveillance Committee as well as the governing body expert have expressed similar concerns on the potential self-schedule incentive. We acknowledge these concerns and the potential incentive in certain limited conditions to self-schedule and manage that exposure to congestion costs. It's important to contextualize, however, that the proposal does not allocate parallel flow congestion revenues for every self-schedule in the market, but only for those self-schedule exercising the subset of eligible firm out transmission rights which have been registered with the market operator. This incentive to self-schedule is acknowledged by both the Market Surveillance Committee and the governing body expert to be narrow and limited to potentially more impactful congestion conditions or more corner case scenarios where the congestion costs are substantial enough to overcome the potential benefits of economically bidding in those instances. This is not a pervasive incentive to self-schedule every hour or every day by the sole consideration of obtaining a congestion hedge. Separately, I think there are inherent limitations to the magnitude of self-scheduling based on the type of transmission rights granted and the physical capability of transmission lines on the system. For example, under the open access transmission tariff, network integration transmission service rights, or NITS rights, can only be utilized up to the load serving entity actual load amount. Thus, while there is a sizable amount of resources that may hold NITS transmission rights to serve load, the exercise of those rights is limited by the size of the load, and therefore not all resources that hold those rights will be able to exercise them simultaneously through a self-schedule to derive a congestion hedge. Moreover, there are physical transmission limits that will also likely reduce the practical aspect of a massive simultaneous exercise of votes rights through a self-schedule. For example, as pointed out in the Market Surveillance Committee opinion, the congestion price effect can have a more pronounced impact between Pacific-Core East and Pacific-Core West transactions, for which transmission customers may consider self-scheduling the exercise of their rights to limit congestion cost exposure. However, the physical transfer capability between Pacific-Core East and Pacific-Core West is approximately 1,600 megawatts, and the exercise of these transmission rights is limited by that transfer capability and likely by the amount of transmission rights that have been granted by the transmission provider. And lastly, on this self-schedule incentive, there are different motivations to self-schedule and not solely driven by the desire for a congestion hedge, and the market participant will need to consider the trade-offs compared to economically bidding. For example, generation may be motivated to self-schedule due to contractual terms and conditions, regulatory limitations on resources, due to resource characteristics, or otherwise to obtain a market clearing priority when exercising transmission rights. The market participant, therefore, will need to consider the trade-offs of self-scheduling potentially generation that is more costly to operate as a price taker in the market, to serve load, or to meet contractual obligations. And they will need to consider that trade-off and the potential of foregoing the benefit of economic displacement through economic bidding and the market finding a less costly alternative to serving load. All this to say that we will monitor the self-scheduling associated with these eligible firm transmission rights, including providing the necessary granularity of data, as both suggested by the Market Surveillance Committee and the Western Energy Markets governing body expert. And we're committed to considering design enhancements as soon as the first year of EDAM that reduce that self-scheduling motivation and incent economic bidding and efficient market outcomes. Separate from this self-scheduling topic, the proposed design acknowledges expressly, and the Market Surveillance Committee, as well as the governing body market expert, expressed this concern, that the proposed transitional design may create an asymmetry in application and how parallel flow congestion revenues are allocated to the CAISO balancing area. This asymmetry arises inherently due to the difference in how transmission service is reserved, and the CAISO balancing area does not offer the same type of OAT transmission products, but instead it optimizes all available transmission capability and offers congestion revenue rights as a congestion cost hedging mechanism. While the proposed design does not allocate a share of congestion revenues to the CAISO balancing area based on any correlation between congestion revenue rights and exercise OAT transmission rights, a mitigating factor is that the CAISO balancing area will receive incremental residual parallel flow congestion revenues under the proposed design, which it does not receive today, resulting from a CAISO constraint and its effects on other EDAM balancing areas. So there will be incremental additional congestion revenues that are allocated to the CAISO, not present pre-EDAM. As part of the near-term enhancements within the first year of EDAM operations, the ISO and stakeholders will evaluate enhancements that remove this asymmetry for the CAISO balancing area, and this will be a priority as part of that stakeholder process. You will also read or hear concerns related to continued transmission sales and the effect of these schedules on parallel flows. The reality in the West is that long-term firm transmission service has been largely subscribed, and there's very limited long-term firm transmission service available today for reservation. But as suggested by the governing body market expert, we will monitor and work with the EDAM entity to ensure that we can gain insights into the self-scheduling of any new long-term firm OAT transmission rights in the market after that entity joins EDAM as another data point that can further inform future design consideration. You will also hear or read concerns about potential opportunities for market manipulation from market participants seeking to derive a congestion hedge through self-scheduling of transmission rights, while at the same time scheduling in such a manner at other locations to derive a counterflow congestion payment. I do want to note that the existing tariff establishes provisions regarding expectations of participation in the market and bid submissions, namely setting the expectation that submitted bids are from resources that are reasonably expected to be available and are capable of performing in accordance with their bids. Both the Department of Market Monitoring as well as the ISO will then monitor for manipulation opportunities and will evaluate scenarios on a case-by-case basis. This will also help inform any future design evolution. Finally, I do want to acknowledge concerns also expressed by the Market Surveillance Committee and the governing body market expert and some stakeholders as to guardrails or measures to the extent that there are unintended impacts of the design in allocation or potentially unintended disproportionate effects. To the extent that there are those unintended consequences or impacts of the proposed design upon implementation, the ISO will promptly reconvene stakeholders to discuss these impacts and consider measures for resolving these depending on the nature of that unintended impact. The ISO and stakeholders will be at that time in the midst of active stakeholder working group discussions when the EDAM launches, and any unintended issues that may arise will become part of that forum for discussion and resolution. There are also potential settlement measures that can be taken to the extent that there are significant congestion revenue shifts that are undue or not intended by the design, allowing room and time for further resolution. As I noted, we're committed to additional analysis pre-EDAM go-live that can further help inform expectations as the design takes effect. The Market Surveillance Committee and the governing body market expert have provided helpful suggestions on some of these additional assessments, which we're committed to performing prior to go live. And finally here, as I mentioned earlier, stakeholder support of the design was based on the recognition that this design is transitional. And we're committed to continued consideration of enhancements within the first year, but also evaluation of a long-term design across a 12 to 24-month period stakeholder process. We recognize the impetus for the continued robust stakeholder engagement on this topic, further evaluation, and continued evolution. And we're committed to launching the stakeholder engagement prior to EDAM go live later this year in the fourth quarter through those stakeholder working groups. Next slide, please. So with this context, management recommends approval of the proposed congestion revenue allocation design in EDAM. As mentioned earlier, this proposal responds to the concerns raised by transmission customers by enabling additional congestion revenues to be allocated to the EDAM entities associated with parallel flows, which they can then further suballocate under the terms of their tariff to provide congestion cost protections for their transmission customers. The proposal also supports timely implementation of the EDAM in May of next year, as it establishes the design that will be in place at EDAM launch. Importantly, the proposal then establishes a commitment for robust monitoring and reporting and a commitment to continue to evolve the design through prompt and robust stakeholder engagement. I think that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Milos. Before we move to the Market Surveillance Committee, let me just check if anyone from the board or the governing body has some questions directly for you. Any questions? I see Rob got his hand up. So Chair Konzioka.
Thank you. Milos, excellent presentation. I really appreciate the way in which you've gone through to highlight all the salient elements of the proposal and addressing all the issues that have been raised. And I believe that you have addressed my question, but I kind of want to be a little more blunt with this. And I'd like to know how fixed or flexible you are in the more durable design. In the process leading up to today, there were indications of where this might head after the initial implementation. And are you flexible on how you proceed after this initial implementation? And can the concerns raised by DMM, MSC, the ME, and others be assessed subsequently in that next transitional stage?
No, thank you for the question, and great question and opportunity for us to clarify. As part of the final proposal and through the stakeholder process, we've committed to near-term enhancements within that first year, and we've introduced for consideration a potential aspect for consideration, and we're committed to evaluating different designs as well. But based on the more recent opinion from stakeholders, as well as the Market Surveillance Committee and the governing body expert, we're certainly open to considering different types of designs and enhancements within that first year of EDAM operations, as well as a spectrum of designs for the long-term design as well. What we introduced in the final proposal was an element for further consideration, but certainly there are different types of designs that can be considered, and through that stakeholder process, we look forward to considering a wide range of design and suggestions from stakeholders on how to improve the design and evolve it, including that long-term design. So we're certainly open for and flexible in evaluating any kind of design that emerges from those discussions.
Milos, thank you very much.
Chair Bornstein, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Milos, thank you and your team for all the work you've done. Let me ask about one issue that was raised by a few of the commenters, which is the return of these revenues to the EDAM entity rather than the OAT holder. And I just wanted to, I suspect there are various legal issues around this, but is there a short answer to that design choice?
Yeah, I believe you're referring to some of the comments requesting more direct settlement between the market operator and the transmission customers for, more direct settlement between the market operator and the transmission customer that is exercising their rights. This has been a design choice within the EIM as well, which provides autonomy to the EDAM entity then to work with their transmission customer in how it suballocates those transmission rights. But we're certainly, I think, as we've noted in our responses to comments, we're certainly open to consideration down the line of finding mechanisms of more direct settlement of particularly congestion revenues with transmission customers. There will be a number of questions that we will need to work through, especially because both the EIM and the EDAM design are kind of built around this structure of allocating these revenues to the EDAM entity to sub-allocate. But if there's a desire from stakeholders to evaluate that along with the EIM and EDAM entities, I think that's something we're certainly open to looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Severin. I don't see any other hands up at the moment, and just giving this last chance for, well, not last chance, but for direct questions to Milos. And then seeing none, I will turn to the Market Surveillance Committee and Scott Harvey.
Good morning, chairs and governing body and board members. I'm sorry we once again have an opinion that's too long, but there are many issues. And in fact, we've had difficulty. We haven't maybe communicated everything effectively and sometimes talked past the CAISO. So we've tried to lay things out as clearly as we can. And that sometimes resulted in maybe an opinion that's longer than should be, or maybe sometimes I feel is still shorter than it should have been to explain things as well as I should have, or we should have. I want to make clear that we start from the perspective that it's important to go live with EDAM soon. EDAM is not an off-the-shelf product. There are many innovative features in it regarding to GHG attribution, the treatment of imbalance reserves. This is not something that everybody else has done. Once again, we're on the West is on the bleeding edge, and we're using innovative techniques. And you never, when you're doing things for the first time, you should never assume everything's going to work right. And so we got to start this process of EDAM's got to go live with a limited footprint, and then we work through these issues over time and evolve the design as market participants and EDAM participants join it. And so that's why we agree with the need to go live on time. On the other end, as discussed in the opinion, we're concerned about the tying of congestion rebates to self-scheduling. Self-scheduling or anything that relates payments to use of the transmission system is something that every other North American ISO has avoided because we want to avoid those self-scheduling incentives. Now, on the other hand, they may be small. It may be that there's just not going to be much self-scheduling in response to these incentives. And in that case, it isn't going to matter. And that for the limited initial footprint of Pacific Corp and CAISO, maybe it's going to work. But we think that that's not a given and that there are things that CAISO needs to look at. And I guess I'm going to have to disagree with Milos on a number of the things he said, because we said that there's only congestion under limited conditions and not all the time. We don't know that. One of the questions we want to ask is, how often is there significant south to north congestion in WEM? Is it just sometime, or is it every high solar hour? And looking at the data and the change in the quarterly data over time, it's not clear to us that the CAISO should be assuming that it's just going to be isolated. It may be most of the afternoon hours in the summer. So that's important to know whether it's going to be just a few hours or a lot of hours. We also just simple said that we think the CAISO can just tabulate the existing data. It's not a big research project we're suggesting. They're just tabulating the hourly data, see what the pattern is during those high solar hours. Is there significant south to north congestion on these constraints that's going to make it worthwhile for people to self-schedule a lot? Second simple set of data is, what is the shift factor impact of the Pacific Corp constraints on those the Pacific Corp resources on those constraints? It must be more than 2% or we wouldn't have these congestion components, but how big is it? How much would be the impact on those constraints if Pacific Corp started self-scheduling more generation? Is it going to be small at worst or not? We don't know. We think it's prudent to figure that out sooner rather than later, and it doesn't require a research project. The other element that I got to disagree with is the physical limits. Yeah, there's only 1,600 megawatts of transfer capability, but that's not insignificant. If only 300 is being used in WEM and they start scheduling 1,600, that's a big impact. So we think it's prudent to understand are there congestion? Are there constraints between the balancing areas historically binding in WEM? Would they be binding for the base schedules or not? Or is there, in fact, there could be a big change in behavior? Because if there's a big change in behavior or potential big change in behavior, we think we need to understand that potential sooner, not be trying to figure it out in real time. That's why we've reacted negatively to the idea of wait and see, and then we'll figure out what to do and after we go live. I think we need to diagnose, and the other members feel we need to diagnose this beforehand and have some assessment that, oh yes, it is going to be an insignificant problem. We don't have to worry about it. Or maybe it is going to be a problem. We need to have a plan. We don't want to be coming up with a plan 7 days into go live, is our view. And we don't want to try to come up with it during, the last stages of testing. We want to have time for it. We're also, we're not sure if the issues with counterflow are significant, and we don't even know exactly what the pattern of rights within Pacific Corp is that could be exercised, but it is an issue. We agree with DMM that there's concerns for that. We probably are more inclined to think that we ought to have a set of rules that everybody knows before we go live than, again, trying to figure out rules if it becomes a problem and having to go to FERC and flail this out. So that's the key elements of our views, and so we're supportive of going live. We think that before going live, we ought to have a good idea of how material some of these impacts are going to be, and hopefully they're small, but we just don't think we should be assuming that. We think there's simple analyses to give us a handle on whether it might be big. And then if it might be big, there's a lot of other things we've suggested you could look at. But the first step is to understand, is it going to be hundreds of hours in the summer or 20 hours in the summer? Are the shift factors going to be small or large? Is there a lot of ability to increase transfers between east and west that isn't being done in the WEM today? So those are starting points that are not real complicated. If with you had the data available, you could tabulate it probably in a spreadsheet. Finally, we do have concerns, as indicated, about the direction of evolution, because it seems to be towards increasing the impacts of self-scheduling. And we think that that's, we concluded based on our examination of the data that we don't see much potential for adverse impacts on CAISO generation and load, because we don't think they have much impact on Pacific Corp East constraints based on the available data, but that won't be true for other balancing areas. So we think we need to start thinking about a more robust design now, that doesn't go and not be pre-focused on a design that goes to more self-scheduling. And finally, we understand there may be some balancing areas that prefer an approach based on self-scheduling, but even if that's the case, we at least think there ought to be an option for a design of other balancing areas could choose that's based on some sort of financial entitlement that doesn't mandate self-scheduling or below cost bidding or any of those things to happen. We don't think some of the proposals that have been identified for long run for the CAISO will actually have the intended effect. We think they'll actually result in continued shortfalls. So we think that the CAISO particular would need to have some kind of financial entitlement based right design. And if it's an option that's offered to the CAISO, we think it ought to be offered to other balancing areas that might similarly have issues with self-scheduling. I'm sorry I went on for so long, but those are the summary of our comments.
Thank you, Scott. Any comments or questions from the Board of Governing Body for Scott Harvey? Mary?
Yeah, Scott, thank you for your summary. That's really helpful. I wasn't aware of the potential that we're currently trading 300 megawatts and the potential 1600. That's quite substantial. And I'm just curious, there's no sunset in today's proposal. What is your feeling about that?
I'm sorry, there's no
sunset. There's no, right.
Yeah, we feel you need to move on to a new design, and we don't think the design should be based on self-scheduling. And I don't know that the current level is 300. I'm just saying, suppose it is. We don't know. And we can't tell you whether the effects are large or small, and we think we should have some sense at least of whether the potential change in behavior is large or small. And if these initial three facts show that there's a potential problem, we've suggested more detailed things that the CAISO could look at. But let's first, in the next couple of months, this could be nailed down. How much exposure really is there? Do we even need to look at more?
So you wouldn't move ahead until you know that?
Well, I think we can move ahead with EDM because it's not going to happen until May. But the issue
Correct.
is, we got time before May. We're more concerned, me and the other members, about waiting until May to start thinking about this and seeing whether we got a problem or not. That's the same thing with every ISO when they go live. When you see things, they might not be a problem or they might be a problem, you try to figure it out before it go live because it's always easier to deal with these things before you're actually running the market than afterwards.
No, I hear you, but are you suggesting that what's in front of us today is not ready to go?
No, I tried to make it clear, we suggest going forward to head towards the May go live, but we're saying that we think it would be prudent to understand more of the facts underlying the potential impact of self-scheduling. And that doesn't, even if there is a material impact, it doesn't mean we have to stop moving forward to go live, but it suggests to me that maybe we'll want to have some specific options available and not say we'll start thinking about options in May.
Okay, so you'd like us to amend our current proposal to say that?
I'm
I'm just
sorry.
trying to get at what you're asking us to do today.
We're going ahead, but we want the CAISO to do these follow-up analyses that we suggest them. The CAISO seems to be suggesting that. So, that's been the thrust of our concern and discussions with the CAISO is that they try to figure this out before go live. And if there's not a problem, fine. But if there's a problem, then think about what changes need to be made to this congestion allocation design before we get into May 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Andy, I think you had your hand up next.
Yes. Thank you, Roger. And thank you, Dr. Harvey. Thanks to the MSC for this very, the thorough analysis. I really appreciate the focus on identifying things that could be known today prior to go live. And actually, I think the exchange you just had with Governor Leslie was in the direction of my questions, and I just wanted to make sure I'm paraphrasing this correctly. So yeah, I guess if there is analysis that's done today on some of the issues to try to sort of anticipate more precisely whether self-scheduling could be a big or small, that the reason to do that analysis is not so much that a change in the policy needs to immediately occur, but it sounds like you're describing as more okay, you're recommending this policy today, but if you do this analysis, discover actually it could be big, then that would just sort of prepare us, kind of get the policy making machinery going faster to make adjustments down the road. I think that's what I was getting from that, as opposed to, I just wanted clarity on kind of what sort of the so what, if the analysis done today shows a bigger likelihood of self-scheduling, so then what? I think, and I
if it
just
shows a
wanted to make sure I understand.
bigger impact of self-scheduling, then you might want to put some limits on these transfers. It all depends on how big it is. If it's not big, we just go with the design as it is. But if it looks like it could be a problem, I think we ought to have some kind of option for what we're going to do, because it may, some of the effects could be that if people do a lot of self-scheduling, the congestion charges will increase. And there'll be entities that aren't hedged against the congestion, and they're going to start paying inflated congestion charges, and that's going to be a problem. So we want to, if we see that there are potential adverse impacts from self-scheduling, and it looks like it could be significant, then we ought to have a plan for what we're going to do if it materializes. And I don't mean a plan for changes in 4 years, because the pressures are going to be to do something. If we have a serious issue with inflated congestion charges, there is going to be concern to do something sooner.
Thanks.
But probably, this may not be a concern. We just don't know, and we don't want to say, just ride off and don't worry about anything. We think you need to have a sense of caution and investigation.
Okay, let me go to Anita, who has her hand up.
Yeah, Dr. Harvey, thank you for your comments to that supplement that also went along with your written comments. I really appreciate that. I think the thing for me is recognizing, yes, there's some more analysis that the ISO can do. And given your opinion, given or Emmy's opinion, given the DMM opinion, I'm pretty confident they're going to take to heart some of these things to look at. And as you've stated, there may not be consequences, there may not be great, or it may not be as big, or it may be smaller, may not be issues. And there could be issues. So I think this, the analysis and the aggregate is really good direction for the ISO staff. But I guess the bottom line is you're also saying, go ahead and proceed, and take the ISO will do their work. And I'm not seeing the need to actually change our motion or change the direction of what we're doing, so long as that analysis gets done.
Right. Yeah, we're supporting moving forward with EDM, but we just think we ought to do some analysis early of how this self-scheduling is going to play out and confirm that it's not going to be an issue, or if it looks like it could have a material impact, think about what we're going to do.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Harvey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Elliot, I see you have your hand up.
I would just ask the chair's permission if I could just briefly maybe ask Milos to briefly respond, because, and as I intimated with my very opening questions, we have heard Scott and the MSC loud and clear on this. We share the same self-interest in answering these questions and are 100% committed, as we've stated here today and in the proposal, to doing that. Milos, anything else you want to briefly add?
Yeah, and Elliot, did you want? Elliot, sorry to interrupt you. Do you want me to? We have two other board members with their hands up, and so why don't I go ahead and do that? And then I was planning
that'd be fine. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, and then I'll go to Milos. Thank you. Severin.
I think Angelina had her hand up first.
Okay, well, let's go to Angelina. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Harvey. And actually, Elliot, you raised some of the issues that I was going to raise, which is that the ISO has always been committed to analysis and monitoring and making sure that we address issues. And as you eloquently pointed out, this is, again, leading edge. We're in new territory. We're creating a new market. And if something gives me comfort, and always has, is the stakeholder process that the ISO always launches and the detailed analysis that staff performs. We try to foresee the unforeseeable to the extent possible. And what also gives me comfort in this situation is that we're starting with a smaller footprint, so we have the ability to test. And then as additional balancing authorities join, we have abilities to do more testing, more analysis, more calibration, and more mitigation towards a longer term solution. So I'm heartened by the fact that we are all in agreement, or we seem to be, at least with the MSC too, that this should go forward and EDM should start live on schedule, and that all of these issues, as serious or unserious as they may turn out to be, can be mitigated, monitored, and to the extent we can foresee what is coming towards us, we should be able to handle it with the expertise that we have. So thank you.
Yeah, and I agree. The CAISO has said that they're going to do this monitoring, and that's what we were asking for, to start looking at this soon. And that's all we are really asking for, in the opinion, is to jump on this before go live.
Fabulous. We're in violent agreement. Thank you.
Don't get violent. Governor Shorey, your hands up. Well, actually, Governor Bornstein was first now.
Yeah,
sorry.
Zoom put my hand down for some reason. Anyway, maybe it's trying to tell me something.
Well,
I do appreciate that this is an incredibly difficult issue, and after having talked to DMM and MSC and read the market expert and talked to staff, it's clear that we are in territory that other ISOs just haven't navigated, and so we are learning as we go. That said, I do want to encourage, and this is a follow-up on what Scott said, a first order empirical analysis that just gives us a ballpark of how big could these problems be. Are we talking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions? Just having an order of magnitude, would be super helpful as we think about, how big are the risks, and to categorize, these are the sorts of risks that could be hundreds of millions of dollars, and these are the sorts that could be tens of millions of dollars. I'd really like to see that sort of as the highest priority, and then we can dig down deeper. But just to give us more of a sense of where we're going and what needs the immediate attention. I say this in part as a veteran of the California electricity crisis, as many people here are, that knowing how bad things can get is, I think, really important in targeting where the analysis should go. Thanks.
Thank you, Governor Bornstein. Governor Shorey?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on Elliot saying that we would turn it back to Milos, because in Milos's opening statements, he made the following statement, or at least the way I wrote it down. So I wanted to make sure that I have this accurately, because it's fairly critical in terms of the discussion we've just been having. I wrote that the staff is saying they will do the MSC's recommended data analysis on parallel flow congestion and use of OAT rights, and that would include doing the requested data research before go live. So both monitoring and development of data now, and then monitoring and analysis of data after go live. So I wanted to put that on the record just to make sure that if I have written that down wrong, that Milos can correct me. But that's my understanding, is that the staff is saying they intend to do the analysis that the MSC has recommended.
Thank you, Governor Shorey. I see no more hands up at this point, and so I'm just looking to make sure that I am correct. And seeing no more hands, let me go back to Milos.
Yeah, no, thank you, and you're correct. I try to emphasize that in my presentation, that we will be performing analysis pre-go live as suggested by the MSC. Part of the data we'll be looking at, as the MSC suggests, to real-time data, but it's important to also acknowledge that real-time data may not be dispositive. In part, we're in the midst of implementation with PacifiCorp, which allows us to model some of the constraints, and we're working on modeling of those constraints, as well as registration of transmission rights. And as we go through market simulation and approach parallel operations, that will also provide us some helpful, more day-ahead information as well, having up-to-date information on the constraints and the magnitude of the transmission rights. So yes, we're committed to performing that data based on the real-time data that's available, as the MSC suggested, and we think there's going to be additional opportunity to provide further, more dispositive or indicative data as we move towards PacifiCorp implementation and some of the modeling of both constraints and transmission rights that may be more reflective of what we can expect in the day-ahead market.
Thank you, Milos. Chair Konzioka, your hand is now up, I see.
Yes, thank you. Elliot, Milos, based upon those additional remarks, could we agree to have a couple check-ins, maybe in the fourth quarter, just prior to going live, just as a check-in to know what the outcomes are and know what the staff assessments are?
Certainly, we can commit to that and provide you those updates.
Mary?
Milos, I'm just wondering, based on Severin's comment and MSC's comment, what the current amount of megawatts are under the EIM with PacifiCorp versus what the potential is. Do you know those two numbers?
Yeah, this is Mark Rothater, and I'll take this question. I think Milos has already expressed that we believe the upper bound of the contracted rights is about 1,600 megawatts. we typically see in terms of EIM transfers, and those are the optimized transfers, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 to 600 megawatts. That does not include potentially some of the base schedules that are actually scheduled and not settled. And that is something that we still need to look into about how much of those base schedules are filling up a portion of that 1,600 megawatts of space. So there is a bit more to understand on that, but I feel confident that there is a fair amount of base schedules that are actually already utilizing a portion of that space.
So is Mark the 1,600 the upper limit of the amount that could be traded?
That is my understanding of the upper limit, at least of the Pacific Core footprint, based on existing rights between PAC East and PAC West. There may be some more that I'm not aware of, but that's my understanding.
And how would we become aware of it if there was more?
We would naturally become aware of that as part of our normal process of onboarding. We will seek to understand those rights, the quantities, the eligible sources and sinks eligible to use those rights as part of the setup and preparation for going live, because that will be the information that will be validated that they are validly utilizing such rights.
Do we have a cap?
There is not a cap proposed. The cap would be tied to those rights and those terms and conditions that fit into the rights under the proposal.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks, Mark. Joe, you have your hand up. Can't hear you, Joe.
I have a follow on to Rob's request to Milosh and staff to get report outs. Can you clarify that these report outs would also be made publicly available to the stakeholders who are trying to watch this issue closely, as opposed to just briefings to the board and the governing body?
Certainly. I think we expect to also share this information in those stakeholder working groups, and we would bring it to you as well.
Right.
As an update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Elliot?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. And certainly to all of the governing entities, want to make sure that all of you are taking away as clearly as possible. Has been iterated a few times, our commitment and really our appreciation. The rigor and transparency of this analysis is in all of our self-interest. We all want the most efficient, deepest, most equitable dispatch we possibly can. Those are the goals of EDM. So we're absolutely committed to that and looking forward to sharing that information on a disaggregated basis with stakeholders in the months ahead. I wanted, if I could, I'd like to actually ask Scott a quick question, because Scott, I think something that I've certainly taken away from the MSC, and something that I've experienced over the last several years just in my time at the CAISO, we're constantly evolving and refining our markets, right? We're constantly learning, we're learning from new experiences, we're making adjustments. And even if when we're taking incremental steps, we're often looking to the next phase of evolution. And I think that the points that you've made about self-scheduling and incentives and liquidity and wanting to make sure that the market really is performing as economically efficiently as possible is very, very important. I think we really take that to heart. I wanted just to ask you a quick question towards the very final, towards the very end of your opinion, the MSC's opinion. You talk briefly about concerns about carve-out issues, and I was wondering if you could just address that briefly and what your sort of central take is on the issue of carve-outs and how that fits into your broader theory of the importance of promoting the most economically dispatchable, most economically dispatched market as possible.
Yes, I'll do my best. Thank you. And, I actually learn from these discussions here because California is on the bleeding edge. And when I talk to people in Europe and Australia, everybody's learning from what we're doing in California. And so it's good. I don't truly understand exactly what people mean by carve-outs, and I've tried to probe that in discussions with stakeholders. And one of my concerns is a carve-out means some kind of physical withholding of transmission. And I think that would be really problematic. We should not undertake anything that means that has that effect, that there can be transmission that is available and doesn't get used. But some of the stakeholders may have a different view, and it may go to what Severin raised earlier, the question of should these rights be settled directly with the CAISO and bypass the balancing area, and that they want to have their rights. That may be what some people mean by carve out. I'm still trying to figure this out. But I know from experience, and the governing body expert Susan Pope can tell you even more because she was even involved in more of these detailed discussions, that the process of reaching agreement on what rights mean in the MISO took years. It was very difficult in the New York ISO, even when they were a power pool. This is not a simple discussion. And I don't, bypassing, having the CAISO go in and decide what all of these contracts mean, I think is not going to be simple. So if that's what carve out means, is the CAISO decides what all these contracts mean for each balancing area, I think that's a little bit problematic in a different direction. I think that in other areas that's a discussion with the balancing area and the people that wrote the contracts and with FERC to reach resolution, and it will take a while. So I understand the logic of saying let the individual balancing areas resolve this in their FERC filings based on what all those agreements are, rather than the CAISO. But I also understand the people that are saying that maybe we ought to have an overall framework, and so there's that part, but we ought to realize that if we take it on the CAISO to develop an overall framework for all these balancing areas, that's a long project. And as I said in some other presentations back a month or so ago, one thing that's different about one of many things that is different about EDAM than other markets, and also is different about the Western EIM, is it grew incrementally. The MISO was a big bang. We negotiated all these contracts. Everybody that was in agreed on what we were going to do, and it went live. The same in the New York ISO. We evolved, we agreed on all those contracts, and bang. That isn't what EDM is going to be. We're starting with CAISO and Pacificorp. How can we have that resolved by a bunch of other people that may or may not join EDM? And it's difficult when you're growing incrementally. So I think there's a logic to, given the way EDM is growing incrementally, to say at least at starting point that we're going to do it balancing area by balancing area. But I also understand the other view that maybe we need a long run strategy at some point, an end point.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I know we've got DMM and others to get to, but just wanted
to tie this up. Yep.
Nope, appreciate it. Just wanted to reiterate appreciation for the input and appreciation. Just want to make sure folks are feeling responded to, and we're looking forward to the next phase. And so thanks again, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Harvey. Let's move now to the Department of Market Monitoring and Adam Swadley.
Okay. Thank you, and good morning, Chair Bornstein, Chair Konziolka, governors, and governing body members. Thank you for the opportunity today to share DMM's comments. Before offering comments on the decisional item before you, I would like to first, on behalf of Eric, Ryan, myself, and all of DMM, thank Member Prescott of the WEM governing body. DMM has benefited greatly from your leadership, support, guidance, and engagement. We appreciate it, and we've truly enjoyed working with you. So again, thank you. Turning to DMM's comments on the EDAM congestion revenue allocation proposal, the currently approved EDAM congestion revenue allocation approach extends the approach used in the Western Energy Imbalance Market and provides efficient price signals for bidding and scheduling of resources. However, after approval of this design in the EDAM context, some stakeholders expressed concern about the impact it would have on firm point-to-point contract path transmission rights sold by EDAM entities under their current open access transmission tariff framework. Given the limited time frame until EDAM is launched and the incremental way in which new entities will join EDAM, DMM understands that the ISO sought to develop an alternative congestion revenue allocation method on a transitional basis. While there are efficiency implications of the proposed design, DMM views the proposal as an acceptable transitional measure. As previously discussed by both DMM and the Market Surveillance Committee, as well as the market expert, the proposed design is likely to create incentives for inefficient self-scheduling. While this will reduce the efficiency benefits from managing congestion over an expanded EDAM footprint, DMM does believe there would still be significant benefits from an expanded market relative to the current pre-EDAM market. And further, the ISO has provided some data suggesting the potential for inefficient self-scheduling would be limited in the Pacific Core balancing areas. In addition to today's decisional item, DMM understands the ISO proposes to implement another change within the first year of EDAM operations. As described in the final proposal, that change would extend the proposed congestion revenue allocation approach to balance schedules that result from cleared price-based bids. While intended to reduce incentives to self-schedule, DMM believes that such a change would instead distort bid prices and result in inefficient scheduling of a much wider range of resources. This change also directly impacts the amount of parallel flow congestion revenue that could be allocated to the California ISO balancing area, and therefore could also have significant impacts on holders of congestion revenue rights on the ISO system. DMM supports the ISO considering a broader goal of expanding the parallel flow congestion hedge while also incentivizing economic bidding. While DMM recognizes the importance of this issue to potential EDAM participants, we believe efforts to implement the additional change within the first year of EDAM, as it was described in the final proposal, should be abandoned in favor of shifting efforts toward reaching a more effective and complete solution, such as flow entitlements. A well-designed flow entitlement approach has the potential to provide similarly valued allocation of congestion revenue to economic schedules, but without the inefficiencies that come with linking cleared schedule quantities to the congestion revenue allocation. To the extent that potential EDAM participants may have concerns about this change in direction, DMM would recommend the ISO conduct analysis and educational outreach that would help to build comfort with a flow entitlement approach. And to this end, we believe there is valuable analysis on the impacts and effectiveness of a flow entitlement approach that could be started now before a stakeholder process has begun and in the absence of actual EDAM market data. We envision DMM coordinating with the ISO, working as part of that process, and adding our analytical resources and providing additional perspectives where appropriate. Finally, I'd like to end with a note on monitoring. DMM is prepared to monitor this aspect of the DMM or of the EDAM market closely, along with other monitoring areas relevant to the new EDAM market. Although not an exhaustive list, such monitoring related to the proposed congestion revenue allocation design may include frequency and location of binding transmission constraints, volume and allocation of congestion revenues, including parallel flow congestion revenues, and the magnitude and frequency of self-scheduling. DMM will also be prepared to monitor for any potential behavioral concerns that may emerge in the context of the proposed market design. With that, thank you very much, and this concludes my comments. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Board governing body, any questions for Adam or generally on this initiative before we go to public comment? I think Rob had his hand up first.
Adam, thank you for your remarks. I appreciate you being blunt right up front that this is an acceptable transitional measure. Are your recommendations consistent with the discussion we've just had with Milos and with Dr. Harvey and what you heard yesterday with Dr. Pope? Or are there elements in what you are outlining that are different than those?
No, I believe the recommendations are consistent. I think we support approval of the item before you, going live with EDAM as scheduled, with a firm commitment to conduct the analysis that's been discussed, and continue to refine the approach and strive for an approach that is separated from scheduling in the market to receive a congestion hedge.
And then, as you stated, that DMM will be part of that effort to do the data and collection and analysis.
Yes, that's correct. We do intend to coordinate with the ISO to gather data that may be needed to conduct our own analysis and complement any analysis that may be conducted by the ISO.
Adam, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Mary?
Adam, I just have a question on your analysis on page 4. You write that this proposal does not have an explicit sunset provision and that the proposal allocation will continue unless replaced by future design changes. Why did you feel necessary to state that?
We felt that in the earlier stages of the stakeholder process, this point was it was not clear to us, and so we just wanted to state it explicitly and make it clear that there was it was our understanding that there was not an established sunset date.
And just out of curiosity, when do you think this should be resolved by?
I would say as soon as possible. I mean, our belief is that there should be work toward the longer term flow-based solution, immediately as soon as practicable, before EDAM go live, to minimize the amount of time that any transitional approach would be in effect.
And do you feel like you have that assurance that we are going to shift our effort to a flow entitlement approach?
I believe the ISO has clearly stated a commitment to conduct analysis, and consider a long-term approach. I think there's discussion. It sounds like there's discussion still to be had on what exactly that approach may look like. But there does seem to certainly be a commitment to proceed in the development of a flow-based approach.
And are you saying that because we don't have a level playing field with the way we currently do congestion management rights in the Western region? Why do you think flow entitlement is the best approach?
Okay, so the flow entitlement approach, it gets to the efficiency and the bidding and scheduling incentives of resources. The proposal before you explicitly links self-scheduling to the receipt of the congestion hedge. Our recommendation is based on the need to separate those things, such that the ability to receive the congestion hedge does not influence or distort bidding and scheduling incentives.
Because what's the problem if those two aren't separated?
The problem if they're not separated is quite simply that by having the two things linked, it creates incentives to schedule in a way that may not be consistent with the cost of the resources, right? Think of it as adding, external factors that may influence why a resource may bid or schedule in a particular way, and can lead to inefficient market outcomes.
So what is the problem with that? Why is that a problem?
I mean, the efficiency impacts, it's that, you can alter congestion patterns. You could, I think has been stated in some of the other writing on this topic, it can increase parallel flows on other systems, but ultimately it can increase the overall cost of the market solution. It works against achieving a least cost dispatch.
And who would pay that cost?
All market participants through
And would
higher.
it currently be paid equally or unequally?
I think it's difficult to say without some analysis how exactly that would play out. It would, I think, likely depend on what the exact market solutions were and how the impacts fell.
So that's why it's being suggested by the MSC that we actually run scenarios.
I believe so. That would be informative to see exactly, how the impacts of this may be felt in different scenarios. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Anita?
So Adam, thank you. And you guys have done a really great job and a lot of work on this issue. While the DMM has a view of what might be a second step or a destination, I think the end of the day is going to be work between stakeholders and the ISO and continued engagement with both DMM and the MSC and the governing body in terms of our ME, in terms of how things actually evolve. So I think it seems premature to me to start second guessing what might be phase 2, phase 3 as we go. So do you have that same sense that stakeholders will also have a lot to say and a lot in shaping where we're going here?
Oh, absolutely. I think our recommendation is just that, that there not be a proposed definitive next step, but just to, consider the data and the analysis that emerges, but ultimately keeping in mind the goal of having a least cost, most efficient market dispatch and achieving that through an approach that, again, that separates market schedules from the ability to receive a congestion hedge.
This is Mark Rothater. Could I just clarify something? And that is two points. One is the approach of using self-schedules as the determining factor of use of existing rights is not new. It's something that we've done within our footprint since 2009 as part of our MRTU design. We understand, though, that in a larger scale and a larger footprint, there may be some concerns about that. And to that end, we as part of our continuing consideration of the future design, the long-term design, we are very open to exploring with stakeholders the notion of a flow-based entitlement approach. And so I just wanted to clarify both those points of the self-scheduling use of rights is not new, and our very much openness to looking towards a flow-based entitlement approach.
Thank you, Mark. I don't see any other hands up at this moment, and so I'll give you a second here. If there's any more questions from the governing body or the board, or otherwise, we will move to public comment. Okay. Not seeing any. Silas, can you open the lines and check for public comment, please?
If you would like to make a public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon on Zoom, or if you are dialed in through the phone only line, you can please press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the comment queue. So far, we have 5 hands up in our public comment queue. Moving to our first commenter, Mark Smith, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself. You can please go ahead, sir.
Good morning, chairs, governors, members, and the ISO staff. This is Mark Smith. I'm with Calpine. Calpine owns a significant amount of firm point-to-point long-term transmission rights outside the ISO. And as a result, we were one of the loud voices that brought this issue forward. And so, first of all, I want to make it very clear we support this as an interim measure, and we will commit to working forward towards a productive and efficient long-term solution. I do want to say that given our point-to-point rights, we saw a significant risk associated with congestion exposure in the initial design. We somewhat apologized, I think, publicly, indicating that we may have missed this in the initial EDAM design. But once we eventually recognized it, the ISO nimbly, I think, pivoted and put a number of important and knowledgeable individuals in focus on this issue, including Miloš and Mark Rothleader and others, and came up with a solution that I think is workable during this interim period. So thank you. We support the proposal and hope that it moves forward through the board. Thank you.
Moving to the next comment in our queue. Carrie Bentley, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself. You can please go ahead.
Good morning, chairs, members of the board, governing body, and CAISO leadership. I'm Carrie Bentley, and I represent the Western Power Trading Forum. WPTF is a broad-based member organization dedicated to transparency and competition. So the CAISO must keep a strict calendar for you all, because I realized this morning it has been exactly 6 months since I first made public comments to the board and governing body on this topic. A lot has happened in these 6 months at FERC and within the CAISO stakeholder process, culminating in this proposal. First, though, I wanted to take a moment to highlight something important that I don't think should go unrecognized. In the last 6 months, there has been a significant step forward in the thought work involved on overlaying an organized market on top of an OAT framework. And this has changed the general EDAM discussion in a fundamental way. The discussions are more nuanced and acknowledge economic theory and realities of the day ahead market expansion. And I think we could all hear that in the discussion at the board here today. And this thought work has primarily been led by stakeholders and then refined and pushed forward by Dr. Susan Pope and the Market Surveillance Committee. So I want to first, before getting into the proposal, express my hope that this demonstrates the ability of the CAISO organization to work together as a community on challenging issues and encourages further transparency and openness by the CAISO to seek stakeholder feedback and support from its internal experts really early in the process. And I hope this not just for the next phase of this proposal, but for all the inevitable challenges we'll face after EDAM implementation. So WPTF does support this interim proposal because it offers a reasonable and pragmatic compromise. It balances the need for near-term stability, which is critical for the timely launch of EDAM, with legitimate stakeholder concerns. Importantly, the proposal includes a commitment to the continued evaluation through an expedited stakeholder process. While many have noted its shortcomings, the MSC, DMM, and other stakeholders raised really important concerns about the incentives to self-schedule and congestion cost shifts. We believe these concerns can and will be addressed through the upcoming enhancement process. So we support the proposal. We encourage the ISO to maintain its commitments around developing a long-term proposal around monitoring and making public impacts on congestion patterns, pricing, and congestion revenue allocations. So in conclusion, we support this proposal. We believe it's not perfect, but really does set a groundwork for a better long-term design. We appreciate your engagement on this issue and urge you to adopt the proposal as presented. Thank you for your time. And Member Prescott, John, thank you for your service and just high engagement with us stakeholders. It has been really wonderful working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Next.
Moving to the next comment. Jonathan Rumble, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself.
Good morning, and good morning to the governing bodies of the CAISO and Western Energy Markets, as well as members of the CAISO staff. Thank you for a great conversation so far today. I represent Southern California Edison, and we would like to commend the CAISO for expeditiously undertaking this initiative to understand and come to a reasonable, though temporary, solution for issues surrounding congestion rent allocation in the EDAM. SE recognizes that CAISO faces a difficult job in developing an efficient and effective day-ahead market design while also having to account for and accommodate the historical reality of how the electric system in the West operates today and has operated in the past. Nevertheless, SCE supports CAISO's proposed rules for allocating congestion rents at the startup of EDAM and the CAISO's stated desire to pursue a more durable and equitable solution as soon as practicable. Additionally, SCE agrees with the Market Surveillance Committee and others that the CAISO must evaluate and study the proposal using existing and simulation data. And we're very glad to hear in this meeting that CAISO, and Milosh, thank you, is committed to doing this prior to go live. Specifically, SCE recommends that the CAISO pay close attention to the dollars that are being transferred as a result of the temporary solution and be prepared to act quickly if the transfers are not consistent with a well-functioning market. And I think that goes to what folks have been talking about, especially Scott Harvey. What is your contingency plan? If these transfers are not consistent with a well-functioning market, how will you adjust? Nevertheless, SCE thanks the CAISO for working with stakeholders to develop what we believe is a balanced and reasonable short-term approach for market startup. Thank you.
Moving to the next comment. Tayant Gossa, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Chair Bornstein, Chair Kazaki, member of the Board of Governors, governing body, and CAISO staff. I'm Please Gosa from Portland General Electric. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. First, Portland General Electric recognizes and appreciates the thoughtful concern raised by the MSC, Dr. Harvey, and DMM. Their analysis highlights important considerations that deserve continued attention as we move forward. That said, Portland General strongly urges yes vote on the proposal before you today. Launching the extended day-ahead market is a pivotal step that will bring real benefits to customers across wide footprints. It enhances customer affordability, strengthens reliability, supports deeper renewable integration across broad and diverse geographic region. This proposal is not the end, it's the beginning. Just as the region successfully launched the EIM, we started with foundational design, followed with year 1 and year 2 enhancements, now called in general EIM enhancement. That same spirit of incremental improvement is embedded in this EIM enhancement proposal. The proposal before you lays the groundwork for a more efficient collaborative market. It's the first step in a thoughtful, phased approach to market development, one that will evolve with experience, stakeholder input, and continued innovation. Thank you.
Moving to the next comment, Todd Ryan, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself.
Good morning, members of the CAISO Board of Governors and Western Energy Markets Governing Body. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Todd Ryan. I'm a manager with Pacific Gas and Electric in our Energy Policy and Procurement team. I'm here to express PG&E's support for the extended day-ahead market congestion revenue allocation final proposal. This marks a necessary step towards a more highly integrated Western electricity market, one that promotes greater efficiency, enhanced reliability, and benefits to all participants. The final proposal offers a way to resolve the current challenges associated with the congestion revenue allocation, but it isn't a complete solution. The final proposal begins a journey down a path to that full solution. It's a first step to bridge the transmission rights from an O paradigm into CAISO's EDAM. And CAISO has laid out plans to address additional enhancements and timeline to identify a more equitable, market-focused long-term solution, which we need to continue to move forward. The current CAISO balancing area is underrepresented in the solution, and due to the challenges associated with melding these two worlds. But by outlining a solution for today with the path forward for near-term enhancements, I think the stakeholders have gotten to a workable solution for the market to move forward and begin to deliver benefits. PG&E supports the final CRA proposal, given its necessity as a transitional step and due to CAISO's commitment to perform the testing and analysis suggested by the MSC and the WEM expert, Dr. Pope, as well as CAISO's commitment to being nimble and reacting to the data, and CAISO's commitment to near-term and long-term enhancements. PG&E remains committed to working with CAISO as the data become clear and in a continued pursuit of a reliable, efficient, and highly integrated Western market. And together, through cooperation and innovation, we can build a system that is not only resilient, but also adaptable to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. I want to express my sincere gratitude to the CAISO management and staff. They've been nimble, responsive, and creative throughout this entire process, and we look forward to continuing to working with all of you. Thanks again for the opportunity to share our support.
Moving to the next comment, Spencer Gray, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself. You can please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, this is Spencer Gray. I'm the Executive Director of NIPSI, the Northwest and Intermountain Power Producers Coalition. NIPSI is an association of IPPs and marketers in the Northwest. We support the interim solution before the board and governing body today. And I just principally want to comment and credit the ISO team for what I consider a form of positive adaptive management. The launch of EDAM, the design of EDAM is a somewhat awkward stapling together of the OAT world with point-to-point contract path rights and quite robust bilateral trading across the interconnection with an organized market that has actual financial transmission rights within it. And in managing that combination of those two worlds involves a number of novel issues that most other market operators in the country and internationally have not experienced. So we are going to have issues like this that come up in the course of implementing the markets, and being prepared to do so and to listen to stakeholders when those problems arise, I think is critical. And the CAISO has shown that it's able to do so in this case. Compared to where we were a few months ago, without this interim solution on the table, we're in a far better position in our view as stakeholders and market participants. So I want to credit the CAISO for making that nimble pivot. And then from the perspective of perhaps the board and the governing body, we certainly appreciated your adoption of the step one proposal from the West-Wide Governance Pathways Initiative of the markets going forward once a critical threshold of participation's met. And I think of the proposal in front of you in that same spirit of showing an ability to listen and be responsive to concerns raised within California and outside of California to make EDAM work for as broad a swath of the West as possible. So thank you for your consideration, and we support the proposal.
Moving to the next comment, Mike Wilding, you've been sent a prompt to unmute yourself. Mike, I see your line is unmuted. We're not getting any audio from your line. Can you please double check your microphone settings? Okay, sorry, Mike, we still can't hear you. I'm going to go ahead and send you a chat just in case you need any help troubleshooting. In the meantime, just as an update, we do not have any further public comments in the queue.
Thank you, Silas. At this point, we would move to the motion, and I will give the governing body and the board opportunity for final comments if they have any.
Actually, Roger, why don't we give Mike 1 minute to try to work out his audio so that we don't feel like we are. Mike, if you can switch to phone, that would be good so that we can get your comment before we move on.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. We do have a couple of board hands raised, and I can either let them start.
Yeah, why don't we? Yeah, that would be good. Unless Mike is on now.
Yes, let's get an update to see, because I think it would be helpful to have Mike get his remarks in before proceeding.
Okay.
So we'll give him 1 minute here, and if he doesn't connect, we'll move on with some of the board comments.
I think we can all see that Silas is giving Mike a direct dial number.
Yep.
Worst case scenario, they can always be submitted in the chat.
Right.
Comments.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's calling now.
Okay. We'll give a moment here. I think we're within our time still.
Hi, can folks hear me now?
Yes. Welcome.
All right. Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate your patience with me. Pacific Corp struggles with Zoom, I will say. So I apologize for that. But thank you for your patience and for giving me a moment to to call in and send in the number. My name is Mike Wilding. I'm the Vice President of Energy Supply Management here at Pacific Corp and have been leading our efforts on EDAM over the last couple of years. And so thank you and the members of the board and governing body to have me. I first would just really want to express my appreciation for the CAISO staff for taking this initiative up in a expedited manner after seeing the protests in our tariffs and the concerns that with the congestion allocation design of the EDAM market and doing it, like I said, expeditiously. And then also, to both the members of the board and governing body, I think this is a great manifestation, if you will, of the nimbleness and responsiveness of our governance here in EDAM and in the market, and really appreciate the willingness to hear this issue. Appreciate some of the other commenters that what we have here is a good design and a good design to address the issues at hand, and we don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good. I remember my colleague saying something similar when the EDAM design was itself was approved by both the governing bodies here and the Board of Governors. And we're in the same spot again. We don't want to let enemy be the perfect of good. And the issue that we have in front of us is being able to provide transmission customers the ability to hedge their congestion exposure. And that's what we saw in our tariff. And there will be reasons for self-schedules. For example, wheeling through our balancing authority areas, wheel out of our balancing authority areas. Again, we are kind of marrying together an OAT world and an organized market world. And there will be differences in how things are done, and we will need to address things like this in the future, I'm sure. And also, some of the ways that we've been contracting and will require self-schedules. So there will be reasons for self-schedules, and I don't want to discount that. And the incentive to self-schedule is something that we, and the comments from Mr. Harvey and others are something that we are committed to continue to look at and work with the CAISO on and participate in the stakeholder process as this design evolves. However, as a market participant and in our benefit studies and the reasons why that we have chosen to join EDAM and to be the first market participant and make the investment in standing up this market is for the benefit of our customers, not only our customers, but the customers, all utility customers in the region. And that is to lower our power costs. And in our benefit study, we see that lowering power costs is a significant benefit to EDAM, and then also the transfer revenues is also a significant benefit. So we do not intend to, make this investment in the market and then just to self-schedule all of our load and resources to receive a hedge against congestion. There may be reasons that we need to because of contractual obligations or other items, but by and large, our intention is to participate in the market and to achieve those lower power costs for our customers, which, as we pointed out, self-scheduling just gets in the way of that. And so our intention is to fully participate in the market. I will say, again, that, appreciate the comments, and we are committed to working with the CAISO and being engaged in the stakeholder process going forward. But what I think here, again, is that we have a solution that can be implemented right away that will solve the problem right in front of us, and then we can continue to work on the market design. And just as any good market, and exactly what we've seen in EIM, the design will continue to evolve, and we will participate in that. So thank you for your time today, and thanks for having me.
Mike, can I ask you a question? This is Severin Bornstein. Do you have a estimate, ballpark, not binding, of what share of the generation will be self-scheduled is likely to be? Are we talking about 10%, 50%, 90%?
Well, maybe what I can answer is that Pacific Corp load serving entity is about 80% of our two BAs combined. When I think of our generation that will need to be self-scheduled, we do have some units that do not participate in Pacific Corp, or sorry, do not participate in EIM right now, where we will be needing to do metering upgrades. So, you know, and obviously there's supply chain issues with that we're facing right now. So we hope to have those all ready to go live, but there may be a little bit of a delay there. We do have some resources outside of our BA that will need to, you know, be imported into our BA, and so there may be self-schedules at the enterprise there. But by and large, we tend to economically bid everything that we can, and we do have a lot of qualifying facilities that will need to be on, you know, regulatory must run. But that's not impacted by this. That would need to happen regardless. So I would say I don't have a number for you of the generation, but I can tell you we're 80% of our BA, and we intend to bid.
Okay.
You know, all the resources that we can.
Sounds like the great majority, a safe statement is the great majority is going to get economically bid.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Roger, sorry for that.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm just going to go in the order that is showing up on my screen now, as I didn't see which order they popped up. But Rebecca, you have a question? You have your hand up.
No, I don't have a question. Are we starting to our deliberation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I've stayed quiet and listened and enjoyed the conversation so far. We've been talking about this a lot, and we've all been reading a lot and studying a lot, and I'm glad that we are finally coming to a conclusion for now on this topic. I intend to support moving forward. I'm super impressed with the presentation that Milos gave. Any concerns that I had, which were minimal, he really addressed them. I appreciate the commitment to working towards a solution, a long-term solution, the commitment to monitoring. We have a top-notch Department of Market Monitoring, which I can hardly say, as well as staff and outstanding stakeholders who will be keeping their eye on this as we move forward. I feel like we have a plan, we have a path. It's a prudent path, it's reasonable, and I want us to turn this page so that we can start doing the analysis as proposed by MSC and our market expert, but really start to become laser focused on implementation. There is so much going on, and I want us, we can eat or chew gum and walk at the same time, but we need to be focused on what's coming next and ensuring that we have the best path forward. I want to acknowledge staff's work on this. I feel like they're probably a little stressed by now and maybe can get a little bit of time off. They've done an amazing job. I love hearing the words nimble to describe staff. That's awesome. I appreciate that. And to stakeholders, this was a lot. This was a big lift, and you all rolled up your sleeves. You worked hard from initial issue identification to where we're at now. We have work to do going forward, but thank you, stakeholders. I am strong supporter of our stakeholder system and being nimble to address topics that come up like this. So with that, I will stop talking and turn it over to the next commenter or the next comments.
Yes, Jan, next on the list that I see is Jan.
Oh, is that me? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Roger. Yes, thank you all, and thank you to all the commenters, the staff, and especially all of our independent experts, because really this has been a very valuable discussion, and I feel I have a much better understanding of where we are and where we're trying to get to. I will say, and I think this came through in all of the comments, that we're building on the success of the EIM, which clearly has demonstrated benefits to everybody that participates in it. And we want to be sure that as we move forward with EDAM, that we hit that same goal. We're building on EIM success. We are establishing a new and broader model of collaboration across the West. We want it to be successful, but I also have to say we want to be sure that it's fair and that it demonstrates benefits to all of its participants, because that's the path that leads to overall big success. I do think that also all of the comments that I saw, everyone seems to agree that we need to define our long-term fix to this issue as soon as we can, whether it's flow-based rights or whether people want to suggest some other things. But there seemed to be a great consensus that we do need to move forward on that quickly. I'll be frank with you all. I personally was in support of a sunset because from my perspective, people work very well with deadlines when they know that they are confronting an adverse outcome. They would like to move more quickly and get to consensus on what I know will be a very thorough, but perhaps very difficult discussion to come out of this with a long-term fix. But I also understand from all the comments that have been filed, as well as the information provided by our staff and everyone participating, that there's a great aversion to the risk of reverting back to the original tariff language, so that is not acceptable to most of the people that are participating. So I personally am relying very heavily on the representations that have been made today and in the comments that we've seen, that people understand that while this is a very difficult issue, we're going to move very expeditiously to try to get to the long-term fix. We've got a two-year schedule that's being laid out for us. I wanted to provide my personal assurance that now that you've educated the governing body and the ISO Board of Governors, we're now watching very closely. We have asked our staff to be providing us with regular updates on success. I'm very pleased about the comments today about using the data we already have, the recommendations of the MSC and DMM, to go ahead and start doing additional analysis now to figure out even if this is a big problem. Because I can't decide if we're all getting worried about something that we don't need to be worried about, or it's something we need to move on and try and fix as quickly as we possibly can. So at any rate, I wanted to say that I am prepared to support this today, but I also recognize that I think all of us are going to be following hopefully progress and success in a very short time window here in the next year and a half to 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. John Prescott.
Thank you, Roger. And what's probably going to be my last decisional item. I have some comments. I'm going to make them quick because I know we're running out of time here. So really, I'm just building on what you heard from Rebecca and Jan. I plan to vote yes on this proposal for 3 reasons. First, loop flow, parallel flow, unscheduled flow, whatever you want to call it, it's really been a problem in the Western interconnection since the control areas, if I can use that term, were connected years ago. But this proposal actually identifies and allocates associated revenue, although the allocation needs additional work, as we've heard, especially with the challenges of operating in a flow-based and an oak-based interconnection. That makes it even more difficult. Second, this proposal facilitates the planned EDAM go-live date, which I think is May of 2026. And really, this is the big picture. This is the goal that we have in order to bring value to the electricity consumers in the West. And I don't want to lose sight of that. And also, by approving this and allowing the go-live to happen, it begins the collection of data which is needed for further refinements and improvements. We've heard that from Dr. Harvey and others, that we need the data. And my third final point is that this proposal is transitional. We've heard that. It will be improved through a focused stakeholder process with input from lots of smart folks. And we need to consider the guidance provided by the MSC, by our market expert, Susan Pope, DMM, and others, all the stakeholders. And one strength that the ISO brings to this is their stakeholder processes. And I have no doubt that this will be solved. I'll be watching from the sidelines. And it also reminds me that this is no different than the energy imbalance market when it started. It was imperfect. It was a new idea, and it's been continually improved since its inception by this process. So with that, end of report.
Might be the real end. Thank you, Rob. John. Angelina?
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I wanted to start first and foremost by thanking staff for all the really hard work. I know that a lot of effort went into this, into evolving all of the programs and the comments. You know, Milosh, Anna, Mark, Elliot, you've done tremendous work as always. And I'm sure we're in good hands, adaptable, flexible, nimble, that are able to adapt to the changing environment and stitch together this complex situation between an oat market and an organized market and make sure that we have a permanent solution in sight as fast as possible. I also wanted to thank the stakeholders. The stakeholders have always been engaged. As John pointed out, the stakeholder process is one that is a robust and very engaged process, and we appreciate everybody being engaged and participating in making sure that we collectively come to the right decision that works for everybody. As Jan pointed out, the market has to work for everyone, and we appreciate that greatly. Also want to thank my fellow board members and the EAM governing body for all of their hard work. It takes a lot of reading, a lot of collaboration, a lot of conversations in making sure that we come to thoughtful, well-reasoned decisions. So thanks everybody for all the hard work in making sure that we continue to work together, stay aligned, and have the best market solutions possible as we move forward with an incremental solution as opposed to a big bang, as somebody said earlier. And last but not least, John, thank you so much for being such a terrific colleague. We're going to miss you, your professionalism, your attention to detail, and always willing to jump in and collaborate and make sure that we are talking to each other and that we come to well-reasoned solutions is greatly appreciated. We'll miss you. We'll miss your wisdom on this board and in this governing body, but I hope that we continue to work together and that our paths will cross in the future as well. So thank you everyone for all the great work, and onwards and upwards.
Thank you, Angelina. Rob?
I wasn't next in line, but I'll go.
I'm going in the order I see it.
All right. So I think it would be an understatement to say that this initiative and proposal seems to be the most intense and engaged issue since approval of EDAM. But as we've heard, there are some silver linings here. Although painful at times, the stakeholder process works. And I think we see that kind of outcome today. I think another important point out of all this is we are all better educated and grounded on the issues and ramifications of solutions dealing with congestion. I don't think there's anybody out there that can't say 6 months has changed our world on our perspective on this. And like everybody else, a big thanks to participants, staff, DMM, MSC, and ME for illuminating the challenges on a very technical and complex issue. And as Angelina just stated, appreciation and a thanks to the Board of Governors for coordinating jointly and working independently with the governing body to get us to where we are today. I hate to repeat a few things that have already been said, but as John was clarifying, this proposal is more than just a solution on allocation of congestion and revenue. There are a lot of conflicting issues out there that made this really, really difficult. And that, as described in some of the comments we received during this this meeting today, is legacy operations across the multiple balancing authorities and across the Western interconnection. You know, the embedded and overlapping parallel flows. Not new. We're talking 30, 40 years. And that really has raised the bar in trying to come up with equitable transitional approaches. And then, of course, as was stated many times, trying to live with an oat world and a market world. And we're going to learn, and there's going to need to be really, really fundamental changes on how we do things. And then also from what we're seeing anywhere else. As previously stated, Western Interconnection is doing things that nobody else is doing. I think the other part that goes hand in hand with that is we recognize we can't make improvements and changes without impacts. And it's tough. I think we all need to recognize that. And to go along with that, we need to recognize that as changes are made, time needs to be allocated on those transitions. We need to make certain that the entities that are working out there, the utilities and the other participants, have certainty in what's going on. And as they make plans, they can't turn on a dime in 3 months or 6 months. They need to be given the ability to do their adequate planning. And we know that resources are really short in the West as they are elsewhere. And it increases that challenge. So as we make these changes, we need to accommodate those aspects. I know we've heard this description of this is a transitional item, which it clearly is. And I just want to emphasize, I see this as a transitional item to another transitional item. But the objectives always being the same. I want to make certain that everyone understands from my perspective that this is not a proposal that we see as a phased approach. It's not just a step. And as we talked about being nimble, I thought staff was very, very good in importantly taking an approach that is a do no harm. And I thought and think that this outcome really is a really good balance in that approach and making certain that nobody is walking away in a really in a worse position than they started off. And that is a really big challenge. And I thought that was tremendous. So there is a need to continue keeping this as a high priority, and there has to be a focused effort as it is proposed. The input as indicated by the experts and the many stakeholders is we need more data, assessments, and aforementioned approaches that address the identified concerns. We will get this with approval of this proposal and EDAM implementation and the monitoring, tracking, reporting as recommended. And as stated by everyone before me, I plan to support the proposal.
Thank you, Rob. Andy?
Thank you. I will be voting in favor of the day one policy change, the proposal before us. I'd like to see congestion revenue policies that are in harmony with the market, with market efficiency. This policy initiative has shown how difficult it is to simultaneously maximize market efficiency and provide a complete price hedge in our market environment where open access transmission rights and nodal pricing coexist, and there are parallel flows that can create congestion. I've learned more about parallel flows over the past several months than I ever expected to know. Today's policy is a reasonable day one step. It provides a better pricing hedge for transmission rights holders subject to specific limitations. But down the road, I hope we can develop a policy that creates even better alignment between market efficiency, open access transmission rights, and price hedging. Thanks to stakeholders and market experts for digging into this initiative so thoroughly. Your efforts put us in great position for further policy development in this area. I'm glad that this policy can be implemented in time for EDAM launch next year. I'm very motivated to see EDAM market up and running. Our priority should be on enabling that market's tremendous economic and reliability benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Anita?
So I know I'm going to repeat some of what's already been said, but we've really watched this very extensively from the very beginning. So when there first was kind of the dust up about the FERC filing from PAC, and I just want to applaud staff for picking it up quickly and all the work they did to engage stakeholders so that ISO saw the issue, responded quickly, brought stakeholders together, and even though there were a lot of divergent views, got to a place where we can at least move forward. And when I think about moving forward, we're taking a step, and I do see it that we're really on this journey, and this is a step in the path to the journey of some destination, which may be unknown because there's a lot of work to do for an enduring and durable solution. I think it's imperative that we do make this step, and that given all the things we've heard today about the monitoring and the ideas about the MSC, the GMM, the ISO itself has some ideas around monitoring, and our market expert, I think that there is a plethora of data that will help not only the ISO, but stakeholders continue to mine this towards a better solution going forward as we look at the long-term solution. I do think that there is a continuum to this, and it's not a straight path. So it could be we take a left turn and we look at alternatives that were not envisioned even today by any of the things that we've heard today. And I think that's okay. And I think about the WEIM, and you can't not recall all the challenges, all the changes that have occurred in the WEIM, and yet the benefits far exceeded anyone's expectation of what the WEIM could provide. I kind of expect the same thing to happen with EDAM. I expect to see stakeholder engagement, and I think what the ISO has done most recently with stakeholders is a great way to continue that stakeholder engagement. And I think with the stakeholder engagement and a little bit of courage, I think that we're going to keep making more steps, even though they may be incremental. And I'm absolutely going to support where we are to take this first step.
Okay. Thank you, Anita. Mary?
Thanks, Roger. I'm not going to repeat what everyone else has just said because they've said it well. I do agree with 90% of what just got said, especially the part about the staff handling a highly volatile, well, not volatile, a complex market requiring pioneering whole new ways of doing business. But really, I'm going to address my comments to John Prescott, because John Prescott, I'm realizing how much we're going to actually really miss you, because you've been here through it all. And I have to say that the way you operate, you're really a respected person, because I think of your sincerity and your honesty in the market. And I've never questioned ever anything you've ever said, because I believe everything you said is being said sincerely with great experience. And so I'm just want to thank you and tell you that you will be missed. And I hope you're not a stranger. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Joe, I think you are rounding out the comments.
Yes, I am. I felt obliged to. I'm not a speech maker, but I do have just a couple of points to make very quickly about why I'm going to support this. Reason one, we're going to keep EDAM on track. To me, that is the highest priority. Reason two, this is an evolutionary process. I think John said it very well. We're going to have little things and big things that we're going to learn, and what I'm most heartened by is by the process and the nimbleness and the engagement of all parties to really suss this out. I mean, it was a very exhaustive activity, very condensed, and I'm heartened by its robustness and leading to what I think is an appropriate next step. And then finally, I would like to second what many are saying. And John, I really am going to miss you. You've been a terrific mentor to me, and I look forward to trying to do half as well as you've been in what you've done over the years. And so thank you so much. That's it.
I stand corrected. Severin, I see you have your hand
Okay,
up.
I'll just be very short. I want to thank everyone who has participated in this process. It has been difficult, and I have learned a huge amount, and I know we have a lot more to go on this issue. And I thank you in advance for the work everyone's going to do. And John, once again, since I already thanked you, thank you again. It's been really fun being on the body and board with you. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. And best of luck.
Thank you, Severin. I see Susan Pope has raised her hand.
Hello, everyone. I don't want to take much time here at an important critical point, but I don't want to talk about congestion allocation at all anymore. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank John very much for his work with me as my liaison to the governing body. He helped me through a phase where I was trying to learn to understand how I could be helpful to the governing body, what kind of reports would be most helpful to them. And he always got right to the center of the issue. He had that uncanny ability to speak to what is really most important. And I just want to thank you publicly, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And I know we all echo that. And I'm sure John can send us his ham radio call sign, and we're going to all reach out to him and make sure he hears it in Morse code, that we love him and we will miss him. And with that, I am going to move to the motion. And it's moved that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body approve the EDAM congestion revenue allocation proposal as described in the memorandum dated June 11, 2025. And move that the ISO Board of Governors and WEM governing body authorize management to make all necessary and appropriate filings with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to implement the changes proposed in this memorandum, including any filings that implement the overarching initiative policy, but contain discrete revisions to incorporate Commission guidance in any initial ruling on the proposed tariff amendment. And can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, we will sort that out. And with that,
Yep.
I am going to ask for all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Excellent. Thank you, governing body. Thank you, board. It's a very robust and productive discussion and very educational, and I appreciate all of your close attention. The last item we have on our agenda, item number 5, is simply if there are any items that someone wants to flag, someone meeting from the board or the governing body for future agenda items. Seeing and hearing none, we may adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Goodbye and good luck.
Thank you.
Yep.
Happy
Thank you,
trails,
John.
John.